Good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Happy Life Show. Today is a very special day, the day right after election. Now, we know who is going to be our next president, and congratulations to Mr. President Obama. Moving forward, our country is now united again. Regardless that you are Democrat or Republican, we have to work together and moving forward and help our country to be as successful and as happy as we all can be. Today, we are going to talk about a very special topic. It's about bullies, about bullying. How can we stop bullies? This is a very important topic in our society because someone that we know in our family, our friends, they have been bullied before in one form or the other. Especially nowadays, we have the new technology, the Facebook, the internet, as well as the school. You know, there's so many ways that we feel like that we need some help from the bulliers as well as the bullying situation. So I've invited one of my good friends, Captain Alex Keisch, and he had talked to many different groups around Richmond, as far as in New York, militaries, schools, churches. He had a lot of experience about the topic about bullies, how to stop bullies in our society. And I want to welcome a distinguished gentleman, Captain Alex Keisch. Captain, welcome to Happy Life Show.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chin. I appreciate that. I hope you don't mind, as I got to know you, I would call you Chin in the past, but since you have become a best-selling author, Happy Life, I'm going to use your initials as TS rather than Chin. Is that okay?
Well, that's fine. Yes, well, I'm humbled by it.
It worked for T.S. Eliot, and it works well for you. You wear the mantle well.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you to say that, and I'm humbled by it, but I'm way away from T.S. Eliot, so I just try to keep my chin up for now. How does that sound?
You have a lot of chin-ups in your book.
Oh, yes, a lot of chin-ups.
I'm slightly adult deficit disorder, and so what I like doing with your book is I like keeping it in the place that I call the porcelain library. I'll let you use your imagination to try to figure out what the porcelain library might be. Okay. But I frequent there several times most days, and when I'm in there, it makes easy reading because your chapters are short, they're digested very easily, and there's a lesson in each and every one of them. I want to thank you for publishing that.
Thank you.
It gives me hours of interesting stories and also great lessons.
Oh, you're so kind. Well, I'm surprised but honored that you say all these kind words, but today's your show, so...
Well, thank you very much.
And I also understand that you want to write a book one of these days as well about bullying, right?
I am. I'll be writing a book. My friend Doug Du Bois suggested a book with the title of The Last Zorge Miser. The Last Zorge Miser. That's in Yiddish, and underneath that would be The Last Storyteller.
Oh, The Last Storyteller. That's interesting.
The reason the story the reason why he decided that would be a good title is because he heard my first speech that I did at the Virginia Holocaust Museum. Those of you who are not familiar with the Virginia Holocaust Museum, we're at 2000 East Carey Street right here in Richmond. It's a more embracing and swaddling type of museum, an inviting museum, telling the stories and lessons of the Holocaust rather than the in-your-face type museum that the wonderful institution is in Washington, D.C. I had a hairball inside me, T.S., for many years about my family story, and I never really told it completely. My children don't know it. My friends and peers don't know it. And so I asked to tell my story of my family's story of survival and my story as well. I told this story, it'll be a year ago, 2 years ago this coming January. Okay. And when I finished the story, Doug Du Bois came up to me and said, I want to work with you and get you into the public eye. We need to tell this story over and over again. Part of the story is that people look at me and they say, you look so young. to be a Holocaust survivor? And my immediate response is twofold. Number one, I say, thank you. And number two, I say, bless you. The fact is, T.S., I was born just as the war was ending. I was born April 21st, 1945, with my twin brother together. My mother and father were partisans in the great woods of Eastern Europe called very ancient forest. I'll think of the name in a minute. But they came from the forest as the German armies were pushed further and further west. And my mother and father found themselves in Krakow, Poland in April of 1945.
Right.
My mother was very pregnant. The city was overrun with refugees. There's no place to go to have a child. But there's a work camp in Krakow called Plaszow. Those of you who've seen the terrible movie Schindler's List, terrible in that it was difficult to watch, wonderful that was very uplifting, because Oskar Schindler, may God rest his soul, saved 1,100 Jewish lives. He drew them from that camp. We're fortunate we weren't there when the Germans were there. However, this entitles me to either be the youngest survivor of the Holocaust or a young child of survivors. Whatever your interpretation is all right with me. You see, the war did end April 30th, 1945, and officially the peace was signed May 8th. So my twin and I were born just weeks before the war ended.
I see.
And so as I told my story, I tell people that the story is similar to that of the 4 blind Indians who are trying to describe an elephant, and each has a different part of the elephant.
Right. I heard
One has
that
the
story.
You've heard the story? One has the elephant's leg, and he thinks an elephant is a big tree. Another has an elephant's trunk, and he says the elephant's really a very strong snake. Another has the elephant's tail, and he says the elephant really is like a swinging vine. And the other slams into the elephant's side and says the elephant really is like a strong, stout wall. And of course, they're each correct. But in order to get the idea and understanding of what an elephant really is, you have to take each of their stories and get the whole picture from that.
Absolutely.
And although my story of survival from the Holocaust is merely a punctuation mark at the end of all of this, it's still an important part of the story.
Right.
And since it is at the end, and should I, God willing, live long enough, I could be the last of the survivors. Hence the story title that Doug Du Bois suggested, the book title, The Last Zorga Miser, The Last Storyteller. I told the story
Really touching.
Thank you. I told the story originally just to get it out like a hairball that has to be thrown up. And after I told it a little bit, I realized there was more to the story than just that.
Right.
You see, T.S., at the end of the story, I start telling how terrible it was that my daughter was bullied out of high school. My daughter. Now, you've met my daughter.
Yes.
Heather.
Heather.
Heather
Yeah,
Keisch.
I met her. Yeah, I met
Heather
her.
is now
a beautiful young lady.
Thank you. She's tall.
Very
she's
tall,
beautiful,
distinguished looking. Yeah.
intelligent.
Well educated.
As a matter of fact, she's teaching English to the students in South Korea at the South Korean Military Academy.
Oh, really? Congratulations.
Thank you.
When you talk to Heather again, please send my very best regards.
I will gladly
well,
do that.
and you mean a beautiful girl like her got
And I
bullied
use-
in school? Or
Isn't that amazing?
It is.
If she's
Is it?
intelligent, she's able to communicate well. She's an athlete. She's tall. She's very attractive.
Did you
and
get
she
it
was-
from you or from your wife?
Mostly,
All these good ingredients,
mostly
huh?
from my wife.
Okay, yeah. But you had some men too.
I one time called a class. Thank you. I one time, I didn't know you cared. T.S., I one time told a friend of mine, a classmate of mine, that I had not seen in 40 years.
Right.
And I called him up, and we got to talking. It's the first time we talked in 40 years, and we discovered we each had daughters the same age.
Okay.
And his daughter was going to the University of Florida, and my daughter at the time was going to Christopher Newport University. And I said, Ray, you won't believe this. Our daughter, my daughter, she inherited the best parts of my wife and the best parts of me.
Which is?
There
You didn't explain anything, right?
There was a long pause
Okay.
of silence. And then Ray said, Alex, just exactly what about you was good.
Well, all of them.
I meant to say my long legs because she had very long legs, but
Right.
I threw in for humor my mustache.
Right.
So at the end of the story of my family survival is the story of my daughter being bullied out of school.
Uh-huh.
I told the story a few more times in front of fairly large audiences when I began to realize that the whole story of the Holocaust and other genocides is really a story about bullying on steroids. I came to the conclusion by deductive reasoning that bullying, decades of bullying, generations of bullying, and sometimes even centuries of bullying are the indicators for creating a genocide. I know a lot of people don't exactly know what a genocide is, what a Holocaust is. Allow me to say that a Holocaust is a Greek word meaning consumption by fire. So it references a very specific genocide, that of the Jews during the Second World War. I venture to guess that a large number of our audience, and perhaps even you, don't know how many genocides there are or have been in the last century alone. I'm going to give you all a moment to reflect. How many genocides do you think there were in the last century? 1, 2, 5. I'm going to give you a moment of silence, and then I'm going to collect papers and grade them. I think you probably would be surprised to know that there were 7 genocides. 7 genocides last century. We had the Armenian genocide where 800,000 to 1.5 million of people were slaughtered. We had the kulaks in Russia where the Soviets under Joseph Stalin slaughtered 3 to 17 million of his own people. Kulaks were peasants that he allowed to starve to death purposely. The Jews, of course, in Europe, 6 million of us. Then there were Cambodians. It's hard to count the number of skulls, it's all that remains mostly, but between 1.7 million and 2.5 million Cambodians, TS. The Bosnians, the Muslims in Bosnia, we think about 300,000. In Rwanda, 100,000 were hacked to death. In about 100 days, that's got to be some kind of a record, sad record. The Democratic Republic of the Congo, 2.5 million were slaughtered. Now, genocide...
Well, it remind me that maybe there would be probably 8 genocides, because I remember that when I visited China a few years ago, Nanking had a similar situation, and I think they lost like 300,000 lives in 1 day or 2 days.
And
so,
as sad as Nanking was, what happened there was different from a genocide, although a lot of lives were lost. This genocide is where one part of the population turns on the other part of the population within one's own country. Like a jackal devouring his own innards when he has a wound, jackals will do that.
Right.
That was a brutal murder of innocents by the Japanese to the Chinese.
Right.
And as horrible as that was, it really wasn't a genocide because it wasn't the Chinese people doing to the Chinese people. It was the Japanese.
Right.
As a matter of fact, it brings up a really good point, because that particular incident and all the other genocides are merely a result of war. Be careful, I ask lots of trick questions. This is directed to the audience at home. Genocides are a result of war. If you agree, nod your head up and down, and as you do that, I'm going to tell you you're doing it the wrong way, because this is the correct way. Genocides are not the result of war. Genocide is the politically sanctioned destruction and murder of one part of a country's people by another part, and for no other reason than intolerance, hate, envy. The murdered look different from you. They look different from me. They maybe pray differently. They might even speak a different language at times. Different complexion, different facial features, and so on. And so I started thinking to myself, how bad is bullying today? Are we heading to a genocide somewhere, somehow? We have to acquire wisdom in increments, so let's take one step at a time. In order for genocides and bullying to stop, we have to stop in tolerance, but people can't think of the opposite of something. So at the museum, we teach tolerance through education. Tolerance through education. But then you have to ask yourself, T.S., is tolerance enough?
Yes.
We think about that for a moment, and if tolerance is enough, then I need to ask you, would you want your mother to accept you or to tolerate you? Now, if you answered accept you, you probably understand that tolerance is merely the road to acceptance, which is the talk that I give.
Exactly.
The result of the talk is how to stop bullies, but tolerance is the road to acceptance.
I see.
Very sadly, when we see someone being bullied in the schoolyard, it's no different than the bullies that are Hitler or Stalin or Pol Pot or any of those demons. The only difference is magnitude. The only difference of size.
The size and magnitude.
That's all it is. It's a bully in the schoolyard is no different than the bully that kills millions of people. So when do you want to fight a forest fire? When it's a tiny hole in a leaf, or when it's out of control with dead bodies heaped all over the place? And the answer is, T.S., let's stop it when it's a tiny leaf.
It makes sense.
I attended a talk at the museum in October of 2010.
Right.
And it was by the Emmy award-winning videographer, Pierre Sauvage. Now, Pierre was only a year older than I, so he was a young survivor of the Holocaust as I, and he doesn't have specific memories of the Holocaust. He and his family were hidden and sheltered by Huguenots in a village 135 miles southeast of Paris.
Okay.
Huguenots were Protestants that knew persecution because the French Catholics persecuted the Huguenots for many decades and centuries.
Understand.
So when the Jews started spilling over the borders,
Right.
looking for help, looking for a place to hide, the small village of 5,000 Huguenots hid and saved the lives of 5,000 Jews. What my take-home pay from that lecture was, T.S., is that Pierre Sauvage taught me that if you are a bystander while bullying is going on, you're as guilty as the person that perpetrated the bullying. You're as guilty as the person that perpetrated the bullying. A bystander is by saying nothing. As a matter of fact, there's a phrase that's going to become more and more common. It compares bystanders with upstanders. If you don't know what an upstander is, think of what a bystander is. Bystander and an upstander are polar opposites.
Okay.
A bystander stands by, and an upstander does something.
Okay.
So my goal is to teach people how to become upstanders without putting them into danger.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, so far we learned a lot of lessons from Captain Alex Keisch, and the difference between upstander and bystanders. So we are in a situation learning if somebody got bullied by, we should stand up and say something or do something about it.
There is something that we do. I call the approach a simple but not simplistic approach.
Right.
To stop bullies today. A simple, not simplistic approach.
Okay.
We have to think about what the Jewish heritage is, because that's what I view the world as, because that's my world experience. And as Jews, after the Holocaust, we dusted ourselves off, we got up, and we said, never again. And you know what? That was 67 years ago. And since then, since we Jews pledged never again, we had the slaughter of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. Right. And since then, we Jews have pledged never again, T.S., and we had the slaughter of the Tutsis by the Hutus in Rwanda. And since then, we Jews said never again. We had the slaughter of the Muslims. And since then, we Jews have said never again. We had the slaughter in the Democratic Republic. And now we have the slaughters in Biafra and Somalia. And we have to say, when will it stop? Well, T.S., I'm here today because it stops today, because we can stop it. And by that I mean you and I and anybody that's watching and listening today, we can stop this. The solution is simple. We don't allow that here. It's going to become a mantra that you'll hear many times and over again. By the way, I meant to tell you, this is a picture of my father, my twin brother, and of me when we arrived in New York Harbor in 1950, a very cold December 20th. Now, it's very easy to figure out which one of the twins is me because I am the better looking twin. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Well, I don't know about that part.
Hey.
I spoke too fast, Alex. I thought you would look at it. Hey, you know what the problem is?
What?
I agree with you all the time, so it become my habit, right?
I will take your first answer.
All
yes,
right,
it is.
okay. Well, you know, but I'm going to let the audience to make that judgment call. How about that?
Thank you.
All right.
We get the picture.
Well, I think they look both very, very nice and handsome.
So the question is bullying still a problem today? And think about it. Is it a problem today? TS, ladies and gentlemen, I propose it's not a problem, it's an epidemic. It's an epidemic. And I'm not an alarmist. I'm a very conservative individual. It's not just a long-forgotten conflict in a distant land. It's not some distant black-on-black crime in a ghetto somewhere. It's right here in your front yard, in your schools, in the West End, in Colonial Heights, in Petersburg, it's all over it.
How about in White House?
Bullying occurs in the White House, and I have a specific reason for saying that, and I will tell you about it someday privately.
You know I was just joking, right?
Of course I know you're joking, but when I'm talking about the machinations inside the White House,
you know, the reason I brought out, about White House because about the election,
The election, of course, it's still fresh in everybody's mind.
Absolutely, it's in everybody's mind about the White House today. So. Yeah.
I propose that bullying is a problem not just here, it's in your home, it's next door, it's across the street, it's happening right now. And here's a fact that not many people know. Anti-bullying legislation is certainly a good beginning, but is it enough? You see, there are already 49 states that have anti-bullying laws. There are already 30 states.
Please forgive me. So there was one have not made that anti-bullying law. Which one is that?
And I'm glad you asked me.
Yeah, please.
And I will find that answer out for you, and I'll let you know about it at the next meeting.
All right, okay.
What I dwell on is the positive. There are 49 states that have anti-bullying laws.
Positive.
And there are 30 states with anti-hazing laws. Do you remember that young man in Georgia?
Yes, I remember.
His hazing caused his death. He was trying for a marching band. 24 states with anti-cyberbullying laws. And in spite of these legislative efforts, TS, it's estimated that 73% of all children will be bullied before leaving school.
High school,
starting grade school, finishing high school.
High school.
So 73% of all children will be bullied.
Right.
If you're gay, the numbers go up to 90%. 13 million children will be bullied this year, just here in America alone. 13 million. Now, if laws alone cannot change bad behavior, what can we do about it? First, I want to give you some statistics that will alarm you. Bullying is bad. Okay, so what? There are a lot of things that's bad. Eating too much meat is bad. But let me tell you something that will really wake you up. T.S., did you know that suicide is the third leading cause of death among young people 15 to 24 years of age? Suicide is the third leading cause of death among young people 15 to 24 years of age. There is a strong link between bullying and suicide. And there's also a link between being a bully and committing suicide. Many adults see bullying as just a part of being a kid. If I weren't on TV, I'd use more harsh language, but the fact is, it's baloney. Or as the vice president said, malarkey. It's not a part of being a kid. It should not be allowed, it should not be embraced, it should not be condoned. Bullying victims are 2 to 9 times more likely to consider suicide than non-victims. This is a source. Yale University did that study. 10 to 14-year-old girls may even be at higher risk, and at least half at least half of all suicides among young people are related to bullying. That's from a study in Great Britain. Okay, so a lot of kids get bullied. A lot of kids commit suicide. Well, what are the numbers? Compared to what? How many balls of string would it take to get to the moon? The answer is one ball if it were big enough. So how big is this problem of bullying and suicides? Let me give you some comparison numbers. Our combat deaths in Iraq, not total deaths because we have other deaths from other causes, accidents and so on. Our combat deaths from Iraq from the year 2003 until 2011, over 3,500. Sad state, a sad state that we lost 3,500 of our finest young people. In Afghanistan, our combat deaths from 2001 to present is over 1,500. So keep those numbers in mind. If I were doing my PowerPoint, they'd be up on the board now, so I want you to picture in your mind. 3,500 in Iraq, 1,500 in Afghanistan. Suicides of young people this year, not 10 years, not 11 years, not 12. Suicide of young people this year, 4,400 here in America. Wow. 4,400. That's the source is the Center of Disease Control in Atlanta. Also, for every death, there are at least 100 attempts. And remember what we said earlier. At least half, and they believe it's more, than all suicides are a direct result of this kid fun frolicking stuff called bullying. It's not kid fun frolicking stuff. It's very serious. Well, I propose a simple...
That's
I'm sorry.
Extremely heartbroken, devastating kind of statistic that you're presenting to.
If the American public were fed these numbers on a daily basis,
there
would be
a
crisis. We had a horrible instance where half a dozen people were killed by swine flu a few years ago.
Right.
We had some avian flu. And everyone's saying, alarmists were on TV every day, watch out, you got to do this with mosquitoes, you need to do that with mosquitoes, look out for the corrugated tubes that drain water, and the mosquitoes will get you. And we had 6 deaths that year. Now, any death is a life wasted.
One too many, yes.
But when you have 4,400 deaths from
year?
Suicide every year, and more than half of those are from bullying?
Well, I think more devastating to that is not just the people who got involved and lost their, precious life, but also the impact about their family, and the one that even though they are not, die from the bullying, but mentally, physically, they were so much harmed.
Yes.
That number is...
It destroys
like
a family.
Snowballing, from 4,400, probably, maybe, hundreds of thousands of people got involved, and they probably not, losing their life over it, but they certainly got hurt, physically, mentally, and all that.
You're right on track.
And I think that your idea of stop bullying is a very strong message in the community, and we need to pay more attention. And your slogan, "We don't allow that here," is a great start, I believe.
It's a great start, and I'm going to show you exactly how it fits in with this momentarily.
Absolutely. And I came from the tradition culture, and when we brought up, our parents always try to stop us to bully our brothers and sisters and our family and friends. And they brought up a very strong topic, is about respect. And I think that bullying and respect, even though we don't put them in the same tongue today, but eventually we need to. Because when you respect yourself and respect other people, you tend to slow down your bullying. And I think that's something that not just in America, even in China, India, modern developed country as well as the third world country, we need to champion that word of respect. When we are respecting each other, our peers, and I think we can eliminate some of the bullying issues in our society. Would you agree with that, Captain? Alex?
And you're 100% on track. As a matter of fact, what you're talking about is my main thrust of my message. I've been doing a build-up to that up until now. Mm-hmm. You see, legislation does not control morality. Responsibility, respect, family bonds. This is the fabric of morality.
Right.
And how do we instill it? Some people don't know what a mantra is. Certainly using a mantra can instill that, but what we need to do is create action as well. It's a simple but not simplistic approach. And how do you teach this? How do you teach this to young people? How do you teach this to adults? It becomes what's known as a systemic approach. What does that mean? Well, all the action that we've had so far about bullying, to counter bullying, has come from above. These are laws, these are guidelines. That's all they are. They can't really implement that. If laws could legislate morality, then we wouldn't have prostitution. Then we wouldn't have littering. But we do have prostitution, and we do have littering, and it's because laws cannot control that effectively. It has to come from the bottom up. It has to be a conscious effort. You can go to many parts of Europe and see no litter at all, because systemically they've solved the problem. They don't have to threaten you with laws.
Well, I think what we are championing right now is how we can associate the message of stop bullying. We need to not just educating our younger children, and I think it started with a young age, and let them know that bullying is not something good for themselves and not good for the environment and the family and friends. And the impact of their action and the words may not be, in their mind bully, but the other person that receiving that message may see it in a different light. And the reaction of that, and often adding fire to the wood. The reason that I said that, because I'm remembering that I used one of the story that I tried to talk to my audience when I was talking to a group of high school students, that someday a sister riding a small bike and fell, and then the brother said, "Hey, you deserve it," and clapped their hands. And but you know what? I'm certain that in his heart, he does not mean to, say things that displease or hurting the sister's feelings. But at the same time, and that small action, without letting him know and apologize later, or maybe just saying something like, "Oh, he was just kidding," and we repair that atmosphere, the love and the friendship and the familyship among the brothers and sisters. When you overly doing it, and unfortunately that becomes bullying as well. So a lot of time it's not what they say, how they say it, but as parents we have to pay attention to it and try to smooth things up and let the brother, older brother or younger brother, when they say something inappropriate, or the sister, and we try to explain to them, you have to be careful with other people's feelings. When we are able to educate our younger children from the grassroots level, and then that love will become much more stronger, and they're more aware that when they go into school, they don't want to hurt other people's feelings, but not, sometimes they just say things because they thought that was fun. It's out of immaturity and our curiosity, and sometimes it's out of just naughtiness. And
T.S., you're making some very good points, and what you're doing is giving us a good overview. What you're also trying to do, have you ever had a screw this large and you have to get that screw into the wall? And what you're doing right now is what many people have been doing, and the reason why we've been unsuccessful is because they've been trying to screw that screw in with their hands. They know it needs to go into the wall, but they're not effective with it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a tool that will allow you to screw that screw into the wall, that will allow you to finish that job, will allow you to fulfill all the words that you just used to describe how inadequately we've been handling it. What can we do?
Right. And we welcome your wisdom.
What I propose is a simple, not simplistic solution to stop bullies. I want you and all our listeners to become leaders for the world to follow by learning to use these 5 simple words. Here they are. We don't allow that here. We don't allow that here. We don't allow that here. And then teaching others to do the same. Try it at home. Just say it out loud to yourself. Look around. Make sure no one's looking, because you're going to feel silly at first. But after you say it a few times, it can become a mantra. And here's what you and I must do, really. If you're being bullied, use those 5 simple words. Don't look the bully directly in the eyes. Just use those 5 simple words. We don't allow that here, and walk right past him. If you see someone being bullied, the bully does this primarily for the audience. If there were no audience, he wouldn't be playing into it.
True.
So if you don't say anything, you become a bystander. You become an upstander when you say, as the intended audience, we don't allow that here. Because when I say it, then you say it. There are more of us that will say it, and then none of us are bystanders. We all become upstanders.
Certainly.
Okay. You must repeat these 5 powerful, very simple words. We don't allow that here. Now, let me explain in detail why that works. Because to have a systemic approach, it has to be very natural. To get that large screw into the wall, you can do even better than just a hand screwdriver. You can use a drill to send it right in. And that's what this does. This is as powerful a tool. And it's because it seems apparently simple. But it's elegant and powerful. You see, it attacks the bully's actions, not the bully. That's important, because you don't want the action. You don't want the reprisals from the bully.
Absolutely. Well, one thing that I learned in my past is that also you don't dislike a certain person. You dislike their actions. So I think it's very much,
that focuses exactly on that.
That's exactly right, because with teaching, we all can learn from our mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think that the message is powerful.
It's very powerful.
And we are ready to learn more from you.
I'm going to give
Captain
you,
Alex.
I've given you 1 point. I'll give you a total of 8 different levels on how this simple, not simplistic approach of we don't allow that here works. You see, when you say that as being the bullied individual, it withdraws your permission to continue being bullied.
Correct.
See, sometimes when you say nothing, the bully just hammers on it, because maybe he thinks he's not getting through. He hammers it on again, and then if he sees he's getting to, then he hammers on it. Being quiet doesn't work.
Right.
Crying doesn't work. So what you do is very forthrightly and very firmly, without attacking him, don't even look him in the eye, just walk this direction and say, we don't allow that here. We don't allow that here. We don't, and just carry on. So it withdraws your permission to continue being bullied. I don't accept that.
I think that is very powerful, very useful as well.
Here's the third one.
Okay.
It removes the bully's audience. We talked about that little.
Right.
Because you're transformed from being an approving bystander to a disapproving upstander. It's a big difference. It empowers the intended victim and makes me feel powerful and strong by making me less enticing now as a future bullying target. He sees that I've got some substance. I have a way of putting up my protective shield. We don't allow that here. So in the future, the bully's going to be less inclined to bully me. And if we all do it
consistently.
Exactly. It empowers us. It also empowers us as you try to transform yourself into an upstander. Have you ever seen anyone being bullied and you wanted to say something, but you weren't sure what to say, and you just, oh my God, you feel so helpless and so weak? Well, I am empowered now as a bystander by just saying, we don't allow that here. We don't allow that here. It is passively aggressive. It's passively, what that means is extremely subtle.
It is.
No one is being attacked.
No.
Because you cannot fight hate with hate.
Absolutely right.
So you're passively aggressive. It diffuses reciprocity by the bully, both towards the victims and the bystanders, who are now upstanders.
Right.
It involves us all, and we become the systemic solution to solve this problem. We don't allow that here as a simple, not simplistic approach to stop bullies, and it works from the bottom up. That's why it works, because it's systemic. Everybody can have it. As a matter of fact, I have some bookmarks in my bag there that I forgot to bring out. I was going to show them to everybody. I hand out bookmarks when I give my talk, and it says We don't allow that here. That helps keep that in mind. When I give a talk to a room full of high school students or middle school students, I tell them ahead of time, T.S., and you can do this with me, that I am going to raise my hand 3 times because I'm going to ask a question, and if you have done this or been a part of this, please raise your hand. Have you ever been bullied? And I raise my hand. Have you ever been bullied?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Now here's something. Have you ever been a bystander when someone else is being bullied?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever bullied somebody?
Oh, yes.
And you see,
not knowingly.
What happens is the whole room has raised their hands. And I will tell you a very impactful but pointed and important story. When I was in college at the United States Merchant Marine Academy, which, by the way, if you don't know, it's one of the 5 federal academies. There's Army, Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard. Then there's the gem of all the federal academies, and that's the United States Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point, New York. The preceding was an unpaid political announcement. And when I was there, there was a really awkward man, boy. He was gangly, his legs were long, he was always disjointed. He wasn't the quickest mentally amongst us. A lot of smart people went there, and I made fun of him. I made fun of him.
You make fun of me?
That's an act. Well, I did it to a room of people. So that, and really, it wasn't just sarcastic humor. I made fun of him, and I had bullied him.
Sorry to hear.
40 years later, I decided I can't live with this any longer, and I'm going to apologize to him. Every 5 years we have a reunion. I was going to go apologize to him. It's just months away, because that would heal me. Maybe he'll forgive me.
Absolutely.
And so I was ready to do it, and just about a week or 2 before the reunion, he died.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear.
He had a stroke. And so there's something missing inside of me, because since he never forgave me, I have never allowed me to forgive myself.
I can see how you feel.
And that gives me an empty feeling. So when I tell this to students, and they all raise their hands, because they recognize themselves, I raise my hand 3 times, and what I want them to do is I tell them, call someone up that you think you might have bullied, or someone you may have observed being bullied when you did nothing, and tell him, tell her how sorry you were for being foolish. And then ask them to forgive you. I was foolish because I didn't speak up. You were being bullied, and I should have said something, and I didn't. I didn't know what to say. You know now what to say. We don't allow that here. When they forgive you, then it's possible for you to forgive yourself, and once you've done that, make a list of everyone you've ever bullied or made fun of, and call them up and ask each and every one of them to forgive you. That makes you so strong after that. It all blends in so neatly into your whole concept of happy life.
Absolutely.
If you can't like yourself, how can you like anyone else? And if you've done things like I have done, and most of us done, watch bullies, and even been a bully, it's very difficult. That's why bullies are so much more apt to be committing suicide as well as the people being bullied. So whenever you see someone being bullied, or treated unkindly, or if you're being bullied yourself, just say and then repeat those 5 simple, self-empowering words. We don't allow that here. Not a lot of people will say what they said before the election. That's why we never get barely 60% even in a big presidential election. They all say, oh, my vote's not going to make any difference. What's 1 vote? They might say, well, I'm only 1 person. I'm too small to make a difference. I'm going to give you a quote from the Dalai Lama that will cause you to reflect and think about that fact.
Right.
T.S., if you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito.
Okay.
Think about that as it sinks in.
It sinks in.
And then Bishop Desmond Tutu, the great spiritual leader in South Africa, who helped fight apartheid, said that do your little bit of good wherever you are. Because T.S., it's all these little bits of good everywhere that overpower and overwhelm the world.
Right, exactly.
Now, Dr.
Well, I truly believe that.
And so That's also part of your happy life.
Well, I try to change one person each time and one step each day, either for myself and for other people. And change is good. We all need to improve ourselves. And I have a very strong motto for myself as well, which is helping ourselves by helping others.
Helping ourselves by helping others. See how nicely that falls in with we don't allow that here?
Right.
You're not just helping yourself when you say it because you feel stronger.
Right.
When you see someone being bullied, we don't allow that here. I feel stronger myself. Now I'm helping someone else.
By helping others. And,
helping them.
And that is my truly belief. And I think it's very important that we had guidance. And, you know, life can be difficult at times. You know, bullying, you know, is part of life, but we can change that. And as we, you know, talked about a little bit earlier with our bullying expert, Alex, we don't need to have bullying in our life. We can change that by either explanation or by teaching or by just simply saying we don't allow that here. And those are very strong messages.
It's a very strong message because of its subtleness.
Very subtleness, and it also helps, you know, to put people back together as well.
Yes.
And so it's a very, you know, encouraging and kind word in a bad situation.
Yes.
I want to invite my audience, please call us and ask any questions and share your opinions and your experiences about bullies and bullying.
Yeah.
And we'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Were you ever bullied? Did you ever think you were powerless? Did you ever go to bed at night and worry, why didn't I do something when I saw that poor person being bullied? Mm-hmm. Or beat up, really?
Yeah. So is acceptance is good, or is it the...
But while
you talk about you know, a way to acceptance.
Here, my number one thrust this evening was give you that powerful ratchet tool that would get that screw moving where you wanted. This is a tool. It's a verbal tool. It puts up a shield if you're being bullied. It creates a positive, passive, aggressive way to deal with bullies for bystanders to become upstanders. However, it all evolves around a conceptual aspect of human nature.
Okay.
And that is tolerance and acceptance.
Right.
Tolerance is the road to
acceptance. Yeah, I would like to hear more about you know, how you interpret that.
I'll give you a very specific example. How do you know when you've reached the state of acceptance versus tolerance? Tolerance is good, acceptance is better. Here's one good example. Mm-hmm. I visit people in their homes and talk to them about final expense life insurance. These are small life insurance policies that people buy late in life in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and sometimes 80s. Mm-hmm. It's a last modicum of self-respect and dignity that they achieve by at least not having people pass the hat around to provide the money for the burial. Mm. So I was talking with this 82-year-old, crusty old sailor. And this crusty old sailor was a retired Navy sailor, and as I was talking with him, I was looking at him, and over his shoulder I noticed something on his entertainment center that was framed. And I said, my goodness, what is that? It wasn't a picture. And may I take a look at it? I asked him, and as I was walking over to it, he was reaching into his wallet and pulling out a many-folded copy of what he had increased in size and framed. Okay. Now, I'm not going to tell you what it is. What I'm going to tell you is the story behind this.
Okay, please.
But I will tell you eventually what it is.
Okay.
You see, he had only one girlfriend in his whole life. Only one love in his life, that was his wife. She was his only girlfriend. She was the love of his life. He would leave on various tours for a year or 6 months or 8 months. He would never emotionally leave her. Spiritually, he was always with her. Physically, he may have been gone. A few years before I visited him, T.S., his wife became ill. And they brought someone into their retirement home in this community that they lived in. Retirement community. And this woman cared for her for a couple of years, and then 2 years earlier, before I met him, she died. He became a hollow shell of a man. His reason for existing was no longer there. She recognized how sad a situation he was in, and because of that, what she did on her own, she came to visit him once a week, twice a month, whenever she could, 10 minutes, an hour and 10 minutes, it didn't matter. They would walk around the complex in their retirement community, and they would talk, and they would share a cup of coffee, maybe a soda. Mm-hmm. The whole time they were doing this, everybody in the community was going, they weren't saying anything, disapproving glances, tisk, tisk, tisking. And the reason they were doing that is because he was white and she was a lady of color. What they did was they tolerated them. They tolerated the relationship. They tolerated what they were seeing. What they did to one another was they accepted one another because neither one saw color. She needed to give and he needed to receive. That was the only important thing. I copied what I had seen on that framed mantle and what he had folded in his pocket. I copied it and didn't know what to do with it. I walked with it for about a year. Mm-hmm. And in my pocket. And I had an epiphany one day, and what I decided to do, pardon me while I get my seeing eye glasses, what I decided to do was I was going to design a special card for the museum, the Holocaust Museum. And I did. And this is what the saying was, and this is what the card says. I had a professional graphic artist. I guided her what I wanted to do. This is the outside of the card. A view of the earth as if God were speaking. Why did God create only one man? And this is what it says on the inside. I apologize, I haven't memorized it, so I'll read it to you. But it says, so that thereafter no one could say, my ancestors were nobler than yours, or that virtue and vice are inherited, or that some races are better than others, and to teach us that whoever destroys a single life is as guilty as though he destroyed the entire world, and that whoever saves one life earns as much merit as if he saved the whole world. T.S., this is a saying from the Talmud. Mm-hmm. I'm not a man of means, so I put a few $100s up. I asked my classmates to put a few $100s up and some of my friends. We put the money together, we produced the card and donated the card to the museum. And the reason we did that was because now the museum has the card there. Anyone goes in there for $1, buys a card, creates a $1 donation to the museum. And you use the card as a note card because you write on this part of the card here and the saying is on this part of the card here.
Right.
And what it tells people is that you understand. Yes. You're a caring individual. So the journey from tolerance to acceptance isn't always an easy one.
It's not always the easy one.
But it's a worthwhile one.
It's a worthwhile one.
Because that's where we all want to be. Because once we totally accept one another, should we ever live in such a world, I think that we'd call that heaven. Should we ever totally accept one another, there would be no more bullying. There would be no more genocides. It's idealistic to assume, perhaps, but I have a good friend of mine who is a pacifist, and she said, yes, it's idealistic, but how can we ever get there if we don't start the journey one step at a time? And it's a very powerful way to start the journey. Yes. Hi, this is T.S. Chin and Captain Alex Keisch. How can I help you?
Yes, I'm enjoying your show tonight. I have one question.
Please.
On your definition of genocide, could you go into deeper detail of that? Because my understanding of genocide is the destruction of members of an ethnic group for the oppressive group to gain, inflicting conditions of life on those members of a certain group, and separating children from the family and giving them to another group. With this genocide could be done on anybody. That's what your definition of genocide.
Thank you very much for that call. I'm going to speak about it right now, so watch us. There's a very definite definition that was laid out by the United Nations and delineates exactly what genocide is, and for simplicity's sake this evening, I indicate, and for simplicity's sake when I talk to audiences, I indicate that genocide is the destruction of one part of a population of a country by another part for no other reason than intolerance, because they're different from the way you look, or the way you pray, or the color of your skin, or the depth of the color of your skin, lighter skinned people, darker skinned people. And
so more you're saying is like from hatred, prejudice, and,
that's right.
and things like that.
Now, if you get the detailed explanation that the UN gives us, it's also making sure that the people can't procreate, have children. It's taking the children away and raising them in another culture, so the children will no longer know what your culture was. And all of that, to the caller, is genocide. And you were spot on when you said that. I appreciate the input. And the fact is, for simplicity's sake, I merely indicated a general aspect so that we could get an idea.
Sure.
And the reason I say that is because I open up my talks usually with genocides are a result of war, right? And I wait for a whole bunch of people saying right, and the answer is wrong. They are not a result of war. As a matter of fact...
But probably it's resulted with opinion or conflicts.
Negative. They are
negative too?
What wars have been used as cover-ups for genocides. The Armenian genocide, there was a war during the First World War that was used as a cover-up for that.
I see.
Yes, this is Captain Alex Keisch and T.S. Chin. We want to hear your opinion and your question.
And welcome to Happy Life Show.
Enjoying your show. It's a worthy topic. Bullying. It's good information. I'm just calling on the genocide when you just gave the larger definition. And specifically, you didn't include, when you named some of the peoples of the world that were genocide was committed against, you didn't mention the transatlantic slave trade. And, you know, it's estimated millions of Africans lost their lives during that transatlantic slave trade. And since it has to do with the ethnic destruction of people, then would you say that the transatlantic slave trade should certainly be included in one of the worst genocides in history?
Thank you very much. It's an excellent question. I'm going to respond to it right now.
Thank you. Thank you for your show.
Thank you for your input. The tragic death of the African traders, slave traders, is a significant fact in history. And if you were to term it as a genocide, and you probably could, the interpretation would have to fall in, since it's one part of one's own people. It was the people who collected and then sold those people into slavery that created the genocide. Certainly the vehicle of the death, the vehicle of the destruction, were the slave traders who carried the slaves to the New World and those who put them to work. That was the end result. It was tragic, and many millions were lost during the slave trade. It was the people themselves who beat up other people in their own countries and then sold them off as slaves. That aspect of it was the genocide. The other was just a terrible, awful destruction of humanity. Thank you for the question.
Well, we are very thankful that for our audience to listen and watching our show tonight. And Captain Alex, we want to thank you so much.
Thank you very much. One last thought, and that I always finish my talks with this.
Thank you.
I always use somebody's words that are wiser than mine. The words of Dr. Martin Luther King, who said, "You cannot fight hate with hate. You cannot fight darkness with darkness. That you must fight hate with love, and that you must fight darkness with light." And we hope T.S. Chin and I have cast some light in the dark corner of your lives, and you have shared your love with us by tuning in this evening. We thank you so much for that.
We thank you so very much to our audience, and we shall all have a great week and enjoy a happy life, and we don't allow that here.
Do I hear an amen?
Amen. Ladies and gentlemen,